My world was the light, a rhythmic, comforting sweep across the vast, indifferent expanse of Lake Huron. My name is Elias Vance, and for 25 years, this towering sentinel, the Fort Greshett Light, had been my sanctuary, my purpose. I was a solitary man, late 40s, perhaps early 50s, though the constant spray from the lake and the relentless winds off the water had etched lines into my face that made me look older, gaunter. Isolation wasn't a burden. It was a profound comfort, a chosen exile. I preferred the predictable, if sometimes violent, rhythm of the Great Lakes and the unwavering pulse of the light to the chaotic, often disappointing, demands of human society. Fort Greshett Light, the first lighthouse in Michigan, constructed in 1825 by Lucius Lyon, stood proudly north of the original Fort Greshett, marking the critical, often treacherous, entrance to the St. Clair River from Lake Huron. It was my kingdom, a vital sentinel against the sudden, brutal storms and hidden currents of the lake. Though the grounds were now an active Coast Guard facility and had recently been handed over to the Port Huron Museum, with a public beach and park known as Lighthouse Beach, my existence in the keeper's quarters, high above the bustling activity, remained profoundly solitary. I was isolated by choice and by the very nature of the light itself. Every day was a ritual, a meticulous dance with the elements and the machinery. I'd wake with the first hint of dawn, the beam still cutting through the pre-morning gloom, a silent, powerful guardian. I'd ascend the winding, iron staircase, my hand worn smooth against the cold, unyielding railing, each step a familiar echo in the hollow tower, leading me to the lantern room. There, I'd meticulously polish the massive Fresnel lens, its intricate prisms catching the nascent light, transforming it into a dazzling, almost living jewel. I'd check the intricate clockwork mechanism that rotated the lamp, listening to its precise, hypnotic tick-tock, ensuring every gear was oiled, every movement flawless. I'd log the weather, the shipping traffic entering and leaving the river, the predictable, comforting rhythm of the light, a constant, unwavering pulse of safety for those on the water. This was my duty, my life, my quiet, solitary devotion. Then, the light began to behave strangely. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, a flicker, a brief, almost imperceptible stutter in the otherwise flawless sweep of the beam. It was so fleeting, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I dismissed it as old wiring, a momentary power surge from the generator, or perhaps just a trick of the eye, the relentless lake spray on the thick glass. I made a note in the logbook, a casual observation, trying to maintain my professional detachment. But the flickers grew more frequent, more insistent, and then brief, almost imperceptible shifts in its color. A faint, sickly green tint, like phosphorescence on decaying wood, would bleed into the pure white beam, quickly vanishing, leaving a ghostly afterimage on my retina. Or an unsettling crimson, like dried blood, would stain the light for a split second before it snapped back to normal, leaving a cold dread settling in my stomach. I blamed my eyes, the relentless glare, the constant rocking of the lighthouse in a squall, or simply fatigue. I was getting older, after all. My senses weren't what they used to be, I told myself, desperately clinging to logic. Sometimes the beam would seem to linger. It would sweep across a particularly treacherous section of the lake, or hover over a churning patch of water near the river mouth, with an almost hesitant, deliberate pause before resuming its normal, steady rhythm. It was like a living eye, focusing, considering, watching. I'd rub my temples, the skin clammy, convinced the solitude was finally getting to me, playing cruel tricks on my mind, unraveling the careful composure I had cultivated for decades. The anomalies became more frequent, more pronounced. The flickers were longer, the color shifts more vivid, undeniable, burning themselves into my vision. I couldn't dismiss them as easily anymore. I spent hours meticulously checking the machinery, The intricate gears, the wiring, the fuel lines. I dismantled panels, traced circuits, tightened every connection. Everything was in perfect working order. Every gauge was steady, every connection tight. There was no logical, mechanical explanation. The light was doing this on its own. A strange, cold presence began to permeate the lantern room, especially at night. It wasn't the usual chill of the lake air. It was a pervasive, unnatural cold that seemed to emanate directly from the massive lens itself. A cold that sank into my bones. A cold that felt alive. A sense of being watched, not by the freighters out on the lake, but by the light itself, by something ancient and malevolent within its very core. I'd find myself turning abruptly, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting to see something, anything, only to be met by the empty, echoing space and the relentless sweep of the beam, which now felt like a predatory gaze. I tried to contact the Coast Guard station, just a stone's throw away on the grounds, a desperate plea for connection, for help. My radio crackled with static, the signal frustratingly weak, as if something was actively jamming it, cutting me off. When I finally got through, my concerns were met with polite skepticism, tinged with a weary amusement. Lighthouse fever, Elias, the dispatcher chuckled, a nervous edge to his voice. Happens to the best of them. Take a few days off when your relief comes. They dismissed my concerns as lighthouse fever, the psychological toll of isolation, a known occupational hazard. But I knew this wasn't fever. This was real, and I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Despite the proximity of the Coast Guard and the distant, mocking laughter from Lighthouse Beach, the isolation, once a comfort, had become a prison. The light's behavior became overtly unnatural, malevolent, a terrifying display of its own sinister will. It began to pulse erratically, not just flickering, but dimming and brightening with an unsettling, almost deliberate rhythm, like a monstrous heart beating in the darkness, a frantic, hungry pulse. The beam started to trace strange, deliberate patterns on the water or the rocky shore, patterns I didn't program and couldn't control. They weren't random. They resembled crude symbols, almost like ancient runes or distorted, grasping shapes, reaching out from the light itself. The light seemed to move independently, its beam focusing on specific, dangerous sections of the lake, or even directly onto me, pinning me in its blinding glare, a silent, accusatory eye, searing into my very soul. That I began to hear it. Faint, ethereal humming emanating from the light itself. A low, resonant drone that vibrated through the lantern room, through the very floor beneath my feet, shaking my teeth. It escalated to whispers carried on the wind, thin, reedy voices that seemed to claw at the edges of my sanity, promising madness. Sometimes they were faint, disembodied cries from the lake, like the last, desperate gasps of drowning men. Their agony echoing in the hollow tower. I saw fleeting shadows dance within the beam, distorted figures that vanished when I turned, like phantoms caught in the glare, their forms twisting in silent torment. Reflections of unseen things appeared in the polished brass, in the glass lens, skeletal faces, reaching hands, fleeting glimpses of watery horrors, their eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. The lighthouse itself felt colder, the air heavy, oppressive, thick with an unseen, suffocating presence. Objects would subtly shift on shelves, a pen rolling across the logbook as if pushed by an unseen finger, a teacup falling from the counter with a sudden, jarring crash that made me jump. Then came the first incident. A small pleasure craft, the Lakeside Dream, its lights twinkling innocently, was drawn by the erratic, misleading light. I watched from the lantern room, helpless, horrified, as the beam seemed to guide it, pulling it inexorably towards the hidden shoals near the river mouth. Its hull tore open with a sickening screech of fiberglass, a sound that ripped through the night. The cries of the passengers rose on the wind, quickly swallowed by the churning, black water, their screams replaced by the light's low, triumphant hum. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the light had caused it. It had lured them, deliberately, with a monstrous predatory intelligence. The guilt was immense, crushing, a weight that threatened to suffocate me, shattering my professional pride and my lifelong sense of duty. I tried to report the light's behavior, frantically radioing the Coast Guard, my voice hoarse with terror and accusation, but my claims were met with skepticism, then outright suspicion. "Are you sure you're all right, Elias? That light's been steady as a rock for decades." They hinted at a formal inquiry, at my potential culpability, at the possibility of negligence. I was further isolated, my sanity questioned, my terror dismissed as the ramblings of a man broken by solitude. Desperate for answers, convinced that the lighthouse held a dark, malevolent secret, I delved into its history, into the forgotten annals of this cursed place. I scoured old logbooks, their pages brittle with age, filled with the meticulous, fading handwriting of keepers long dead. I found old maritime records, dusty newspaper clippings from the Port Huron archives, and obscure local legends whispered only in the darkest corners of taverns. I uncovered unsettling details. Previous keepers who went mad, their final log entries descending into frantic, incoherent gibberish. Keepers who disappeared without a trace, their belongings left behind, as if they had simply ceased to exist. Stories of ships lost under mysterious circumstances, always during periods of unusual light activity. A phrase that now sent shivers down my spine, echoing the very words I had used. The records were sparse, often dismissed as superstition or the ravings of isolated men, but the pattern was undeniable. A horrifying tapestry woven through centuries. I found legends of a powerful, ancient entity associated with this very point on Lake Huron, long before the lighthouse was built. Tales of a lake siren or a devouring current that claimed souls, drawing them to their doom, feeding on their despair. And then a particularly chilling account. A series of unexplained drownings in the early 1900s, local fishermen and sailors, their bodies never recovered, all reported last seen near the lighthouse during periods of thick fog and strange, dancing lights. The lighthouse, I realized with a sickening lurch, was built directly over a watery mass grave, a place where the lake itself held a hungry, ancient power, a primordial evil, a tragic history that had imbued the very rock, and perhaps the beacon itself, with a malevolent presence, a consciousness that had merely lain dormant, waiting for its moment. Connecting the erratic behavior, the manifestations, the shipwrecks, and the historical accounts, I formed a terrifying theory, one that solidified into a horrifying, undeniable truth. The light isn't just malfunctioning. It's sentient. It's a malevolent entity, perhaps a trapped spirit, a cosmic horror, or a beacon for something sinister from the depths of Lake Huron. A hungry, ancient consciousness that has possessed the lighthouse, making it its eye, its lure. It feeds on despair, on destruction, on the souls of the lost, growing stronger with each life it claims. And it wants me to be its new instrument, its next victim. It wants to consume me, to make me one with its destructive purpose, to add my torment to its endless chorus of screams. The light's communication became overt, a direct assault on my mind, a violation of my very being. The humming coalesced into a chilling, multi-layered voice, speaking directly to me, through the very air, through my thoughts, bypassing my ears entirely. It was a chorus of tormented souls, each voice a whisper, a scream, a plea, all woven into a single, horrifying entity, a symphony of suffering. Serve us, Elias, guide them to the depths, be our eyes, our hand, forever. It revealed its purpose, to lure, to consume, to spread its influence, to feed its insatiable hunger. It demanded my surrender, my cooperation, or threatened my sanity, my life, my very soul, promising an eternity of torment. The beam projected horrifying visions onto the walls of the lantern room. Past shipwrecks, the faces of drowning men, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths open in silent screams, their bodies twisting in the dark water. And then, my own face, distorted, trapped within the swirling depths of the lake, my eyes reflecting the monstrous, crimson light. I fought back, a desperate, frantic struggle against an unseen, overwhelming force, a battle for my very soul. I attempted to regain control. I tried to shut down the light, to disable the mechanism, to sever its connection to whatever malevolent force controlled it. I pulled levers, threw switches, my hands raw, desperate to extinguish the malevolent glare, to silence the voices. The lighthouse itself fought back with a terrifying, conscious rage. Doors slammed shut with bone-jarring force, trapping me. Machinery seized, gears grinding to a halt with a shriek of metal, then violently restarting on their own, mocking my efforts. The winding stairs became treacherous, slick with an unseen, foul-smelling slime, the iron railings impossibly cold, burning my skin. The glass lens of the lantern room pulsed with an internal heat, too hot to touch, then shattered with a deafening crack, shards raining down around me like deadly confetti, reflecting the monstrous light, each piece a tiny, malevolent eye. The entity tried to physically stop me, to break my will, to force my surrender, to make me one of its own. That I was led, or perhaps driven, to a specific, deeply unsettling point within the lighthouse, not by choice, but by the relentless, overwhelming will of the entity. It was the very heart of the Fresnel lens itself, the massive glass eye of the beacon. The light became blinding, overwhelming, a torrent of pure malevolence, pouring into my mind, threatening to consume me entirely. The full, horrifying nature of the entity was revealed. It was not just a ghost, but something ancient, elemental, a force that had always been there, a primordial hunger from the depths of Lake Huron, using the lighthouse as its tool, its eye, its lure, its insatiable MW.it wanted to consume me, to make me one with its destructive purpose, to simply trap me as another tormented soul, another voice in its horrifying chorus. I felt my own consciousness begin to fray, my identity dissolving under the relentless assault, my memories twisting into grotesque parodies. I saw the faces of the lost, their eyes empty, their mouths open in silent screams, their forms swirling within the blinding light, beckoning me to join them, to find their twisted peace with a final, desperate surge of defiance. A primal scream that tore from my throat, a last, desperate act of will. I lunged. I grabbed the heaviest wrench I could find, its cold metal a grounding force in the chaos, a tangible link to my fading reality. I aimed for the massive central prism of the Fresnel lens, the very heart of the light, the eye of the entity, the source of all the horror. I swung, with all the strength I had left, fueled by terror and a desperate, unyielding refusal to become another victim, another voice in its endless wail. The impact was deafening, a shattering explosion of glass and light that vibrated through the very bedrock of the island. The lighthouse screamed, a sound that was both mechanical and utterly alive, a dying shriek of pure, ancient rage. The beam flickered wildly, convulsed, and then, with a final, agonizing groan that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth, went dark. That I lay amidst the shattered glass, bleeding, broken, but miraculously, terrifyingly, alive. The oppressive presence in the lantern room diminished, replaced by a chilling, hollow silence. I had done it. I had temporarily disabled the light, severed its connection to the malevolent force, escaping the lighthouse but forever scarred, forever haunted. The Coast Guard found me 2 days later, huddled in the wreckage of the lantern room, barely conscious. They found the shattered lens, the damaged machinery, the inexplicable cold. They found me, a broken man, haunted by the wrecks and the voices, my sanity hanging by a thread, my eyes wide with a terror they could never comprehend. The light of Fort Gresham Beacon went dark that night, never to be fully restored to its former unholy glory. They replaced the old lens, installed new, modern equipment, but it was never the same. The essence, the malevolence, had been wounded, but not destroyed. That I was taken to the mainland, to a hospital, then to a quiet, isolated cottage, far from the sound of the lake. I never returned to the water, never looked at a lighthouse again. The light might have gone dark, but the sense of its presence lingers, a phantom limb of my soul, a constant, chilling reminder. I am a broken man, haunted by the wrecks and the voices, the cries of the lost echoing in the quiet chambers of my mind. I know the light is still out there, waiting, its ancient hunger merely dormant beneath the murky waters of Lake Huron. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon is full and the tide is high, I swear I can still see a faint, unsettling crimson tint in the distant lake spray, a chilling reminder that the light was never truly mine, and it never truly died.